Hi everyone, this is Anthony O'Flynn coming to you from the Sunshine Coast. This topic of mass formation psychosis has been a real buzzword in terms of what we're seeing at a global level in regard to the ongoing pandemic. And in this video I will begin at least to address this topic from a spiritual perspective, because the term mass formation psychosis itself has really been addressed from the point of view of only from psychology, which is important, and also the spiritual dimension of this key consensus or collective psychology has often been overlooked without an adequate explanation as to what is actually occurring in terms of people's spiritual development or lack of spiritual development, which I'll be looking at here in this video, at least giving some introductory principles around this to help people integrate what is going on in their own communities, in themselves, in their families, colleagues, friends, etc. And I guess it's important to state in the beginning that the people most likely watching this are not experiencing mass formation psychosis. And the question that everyone needs to be asking right from the start is, if you're not experiencing it, why? Why are you not experiencing it? Why are you not participating in this indoctrination? Why are you not connecting with the collective at this level? And this is a very, very key topic, and it's the question that I haven't seen in the conversation around mass formation psychosis anyone really addressing with any depth or clarity. So the first thing to understand about this concept is that we're talking about the collective consciousness, which is a incredibly powerful domain in which we're all plugged into to some degree. Now, it's important to say at the onset of this discussion that the collective is not necessarily bad, but the collective is the norm. It's all the things that we take for granted that we basically pick up even from birth, that are basically the done things. The collective can be very good, it can actually be completely diabolical, and a lot of this is unconscious. So simple things. So you say hello to someone when you meet them, you say how are you to someone, you wave at someone to get their attention or as a form of greeting. You use your fork with your left hand and your knife with your right hand. You wish someone a happy birthday when it's their birthday. I mean, it's so many of these very, very simple things that are basically ingrained in the collective behaviour. Now, I'm not going to say some of these things are good or bad, but what is important to understand is that they are a reflection of the hive mind, the done thing, whatever is conceived to be a normal form of behaviour, conduct, gesture, mannerism, expression, any of these things. So when we think about the collective consciousness, we are all connected to it, and people who think they're not, that they have risen above it in this way, is not correct way to think, because we are all to a degree. Now, that's really the key point to follow on, is how connected are we to the hive mind? Because the hive mind will determine the norm of behaviour, the basic fundamental building blocks for things that emerge from the collective. Interests, all those big things, sports, national identity, Olympics, world championships in something, World Cup in football, these sorts of things, big sporting tournaments, elections, pop culture phenomenon in terms of celebrities, movies, various forms of cinematography, music, dance, art, when it reaches a certain mass level. Now, this means that the collective mind is malleable. And what we've seen through the pandemic is there is an attempt to introduce new concepts, new belief systems into the hive mind. Now, this is a key aspect of what is occurring, because some people, although they can perceive that these values, these principles, these behaviours are attempted to be introduced into the hive mind, reject them. And this is nothing new. The hive mind is nothing new. The collective is nothing new. Mass formation psychosis is nothing new. It's been going on this planet for millennia. And what we're looking for is an explanation of why it is so easy to indoctrinate millions, billions of people into ideas, concepts, belief systems, behaviours that are completely to their detriment. And it's quite amazing. And really it does come back to principles of psychology, but also at a deeper level, principles of spirituality and in terms of consciousness. Now, this is where it becomes extremely confrontational for people who are what I would refer to as well-educated, who are perhaps professionals, who perhaps have high socioeconomic status, who are respectable members of society, and who are completely indoctrinated into the hive mind and actually are not immune to this way of thinking. And the thing is that most people who are unaware of what is occurring with the hive mind, they reject this analysis. So I just want to read to you a paragraph from my book that really sums up this hive mind and the inability for people to perceive they are connected to the hive, and the hive is actually literally determining their thought patterns. So, the masses have been indoctrinated to seek out servitude. Due to their lack of self-belief and autonomy, they are lost without the support of the herd. This is the consciousness of Svadhisthana chakra. It is a far more accurate analysis of the challenges that are facing humanity than simply choosing the red pill or the blue pill. It is the nature of evolution itself. To question everything that you have been told to believe, to challenge the mainstream indoctrination, and to move into a place of sovereignty requires maturity. This elevated consciousness has a deeper inner self-reliance. A more mature soul is not interested in being popular, fitting in, or gaining approval from others. They are who they are, and a popular approval is not something they seek. These ideas float around in the personal development movement, but they are only truly embodied by those who have detached or are in the process of detaching from the hive mind. Energetically, it is a vertical path. Only one who is truly walking this journey can see another who is on this path. Those with their consciousness plugged into the hive mind are dependent on the system for their sense of self-worth and an outward externalized definition of who they are. This insecurity and lack of definition characterize the consciousness that is anchored in Svadhisthana chakra. So obviously the key terms to pull out of this paragraph are basically Svadhisthana chakra, so we're talking about consciousness. And as an intro into this topic, we need to consider that there is a difference between consciousness and intellect. Intellect and consciousness are something completely different. And many people who would be considered to be intelligent, it's based on academic achievement, and yet consciousness is something that is separate. So even Noam Chomsky said, the whole educational and professional training system is a very elaborate filter which just weeds out people who are too independent and who think for themselves and who don't know how to be submissive and so on, because they're dysfunctional to the institutions. And that's from Noam Chomsky, who's considered to be one of the greatest academics in US history, who's still alive today. So where does that leave us? That quote is also taken from my book. Where does that leave us? It means that when we think of this distinction between consciousness and intellect, we're looking at something that is not able to be perceived in terms of credentials, qualifications, merits, awards, occupation, income, postcode, all these sorts of things. We're talking about the perception of reality. How do I perceive reality? How do I connect to the universe? And how does the universe connect to me? From the principle of consciousness, not rote learning facts at university. And I don't say these words lightly because I went to university myself for 6 years. So we see this verticality. And without going in too much to the esoteric information in this video, because the light is starting to fade, we see that there is a detaching from the hive mind. There is an elevation of consciousness. That means that the one who is immune or not able to be indoctrinated with this psychosis, because this psychosis is pathologically unwell, and it at the same time normalizes pathological unwellness. And that is one of the most dangerous aspects of it, that insanity is then considered to be normal. And that's what we've seen with the pandemic, clearly. Some of the behaviours, some of the reactions, some of the commentary and some of the policies that, by these non-elected government bureaucrats and so on. So therefore, we have this collective that we're all plugged into. But the question I said at the start, why is it that some people are immune to this indoctrination, to this mass hypnosis? It's because the consciousness is in the process of separating, or has separated in degrees, so there's shades of grey, it's not black or white, from the collective, and will therefore evaluate norms, the done thing, the consensus reality in a completely different way. And it very often will mean that someone who is in the process of detaching will look at the collective, at least in terms of some of the behaviours, some of the norms, as being normalised insanity. And that is the question that people need to ask more is, am I completely going along with this, the norms, the hive mind, the collective, or am I starting to forge my own path? And this other term came up in the quote that I read from my book, sovereignty, because the individuals at a high level of consciousness, and this is defined in terms of the chakras, which we'll come to, is basically a reflection of sovereignty. Am I a sovereign individual? Because it has been seen that many people who function in institutions, organisations, corporations, they basically, not everyone, and again it's shades of grey and they're generalisations, so you can't think in terms of black and white, but there's a tendency for these types of people to have very little sovereignty in their life, and also to be very much connected to the hive mind, the collective. Whereas people who are not at the same level of this connection to the hive mind, this separation, having more sovereignty, are more self-reliant, are more independent, are more having levels of self-determination in their life, and are actually seeking more autonomy and greater sovereignty. And this has no relationship to someone's education level or their income or occupation or anything like this, because it is consciousness. It's not anything to do with intellect. And this is very confronting for people who consider themselves to be experts in certain fields, where they are presented new information that would challenge their original beliefs or viewpoints on certain issues, that they're unable to integrate this new information, which is not just cognitive dissonance, but it's also the fact that they need to take a position where they are isolated, where they could be alone, where they could be the lone voice, where they could go against the norm, where they could basically separate from the herd, from the collective. Now, this perceived safety in the norm is very dangerous if the collective is in a state of total psychosis, which is what we're seeing. So this does not mean that doing the done thing is wise. In fact, it could be completely unwise, it could be completely illogical, and it could be highly detrimental to your health. And it's something that those who are following the hive mind for this connection to safety, which is not safety, it's perceived safety, is ultimately dominated by fear. And therefore it is at a genuinely lower state of consciousness because it is characterized by fear and different forms of fear itself. And so therefore, in terms of what we're seeing now with this mass formation psychosis, is that it is extremely disadvantageous, but you cannot ever judge someone or criticize someone for being at this level of consciousness, because this is the entire process of evolution in order to grow and to become more vertical and to start to find our own path, truly our own way, and not just simply go along with the norm without questioning it or evaluating it, which is very difficult and not even really possible for people who are simply at this level of consciousness. And this is extremely confronting for people. But at the same time, if we look at other parameters of success in this worldly reality in terms of financial remuneration or assets or success or titles or accolades, that would be considered to be totally fine to evaluate people in terms of that. But in terms of consciousness, that can be a real trigger to some people. And that's something that, if that's happening to you watching this video, you have to take that on board. Is how is it okay to evaluate someone's worth from these external parameters or metrics that are very acceptable by the hive mind, but not in terms of consciousness? It's because it's so provoking that some people are genuinely walking around on this planet with a higher level of consciousness that they have earned through their own evolution, through their own capacity of critical thinking, for their ability to evaluate, analyze, research, and are immune to indoctrination into the masses, and always will be immune, because they simply are resonating, they're vibrating at a truly higher state of consciousness. And this is the path for humanity in this great paradigm shift, and this is the way forward for people to start to become more sovereign. And this is one of the key factors of the overall global awakening, is this quest for sovereignty. And you're going to see this is going to be quite profound in terms of people starting to question the norm, challenge the norm, and start to basically walk to the beat of their own drum. So it's very exciting to witness this, to participate in this, and I'll build on these concepts further, because it is complex, but it is also very much at a psychological and spiritual factors that influence the ability to integrate various frequencies, ways of living, perceiving reality on this planet. Always has been, always will be. And we are subject to the laws of the universe, not the laws of various governmental regulations and so on. And this is a return to what I term universal law, which is coming and is part of this global awakening of humanity. I'll leave a link in the description for my book, Paradigm Shift, The Global Awakening of Humanity 2020 to 2040. Thanks for watching. Plenty more to come.